Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere quiet, far away from battlefields and emperors, past the loud halls of kings, and into the thick stone walls of a medieval convent. It's dawn in the 1100s, and your bare feet scrape across chilly floor tiles. Candlelight flickers off rough-cut stone as you follow the scent of something bubbling. A warm, slightly bitter smell you didn't expect in a place of prayer. Because here, in this sleepy abbey, the nuns are brewing beer. You probably won't survive this. Not because of ghosts or plagues, though they're both waiting in the wings, but because you're about to spend the day following the strict routine of medieval religious life, powered by little sleep, a lot of kneeling, and just enough ale to keep things blurry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history show reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe fluff your pillows, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake inside a world that smells of beeswax, damp wool, and brewing malt. Outside the abbey walls, the rest of medieval Europe is loud and unruly. Feudal lords arguing over sheep, merchants measuring spice with dishonest scales, and the occasional bored knight picking a fight with a tree. But inside this convent, silence reigns. Until someone opens the brew cellar. You wouldn't think to find fermentation barrels next to hymnals, but there they are, lined up like choir stalls, bubbling with promise. Brewing was more than a craft in places like this. It was spiritual, practical, and occasionally life-saving. And it started early. The bells toll for lauds, and you shuffle to morning prayer with the rest of the sisters. No one speaks. Not because they've taken a vow of silence, though some orders did, but because everyone's still half asleep and a little hungover from last night's ale, which, to be fair, was consumed for hydration purposes. Historians still argue whether beer was brewed out of genuine monastic necessity or because nuns just had excellent taste. Either way, by the early 1100s, convents across Europe, especially in Germany, Flanders, and northern France, had developed sophisticated brewing systems. And not just any beer. Some of it had spice blends so intense your sinuses might just confess your sins for you. The abbey's brewery is tucked behind the herb garden, where lavender grows in perfect rows, and a goose named Jerome keeps watch like a feathery monk. Inside, the brewing sisters are already at work. There's Sister Magda, the one who swears she can taste sins in a barley grain, and Sister Agnes, who once tried to bless the entire brew vat with holy water and nearly started a foam avalanche. They grind grain, stir mash, and chant softly as the steam rises. Brewing, here, is a form of devotion. Each motion, measuring hops, skimming foam, is done with care. The tools are simple. Wooden paddles, heavy iron kettles, stone floors that always seem damp. But the results? Remarkably sophisticated. The beer they make isn't just for sipping after Vespers. It's the safer alternative to local water, which often doubled as a dumping ground for medieval industries, best not mentioned before bed. Ale was a staple, and the nuns brewed it not just for themselves, but for guests, pilgrims, the poor, and, depending on the abbey's fame, perhaps even visiting nobility. Some convents ran operations so large they had contracts with nearby towns. They paid taxes in beer, they hired coopers and maltsters, they even had secret recipes, passed down like family treasures, with herbs and spices known only to the sisters and maybe the local healer who kept mysteriously forgetting to die. And then there's the fringe detail. A few abbey records refer to beer visions, strange dreams had during brewing, messages from saints. Occasionally, a batch of ale would be declared holy, either because it healed someone, or because a mysterious figure in a cloak was seen drinking it before vanishing into the grain stores. Was it a miracle? A hallucination? A tipsy gardener? No one really wanted to investigate too hard. Your hands are warm from the kettle now, your linen sleeves damp and aromatic. Outside, the crows argue in the belfry. Inside, Sister Magda leans close and whispers that the last brew tasted too much like judgment. You nod, because there's really no safe reply to that. As the day stretches ahead, you'll learn more than you expected about yeast, discipline, and how to pray while scrubbing soot off copper pots. And if you're lucky, you'll get to sneak down to the cellar after dark, where one barrel is labelled simply, "Do not open unless the ghost knocks twice." But for now, you're still in the steam and shadows, listening to hymns echo off brew-splattered stone, wondering how holiness and hops ever ended up in the same room. You won't get the answer tonight, but don't worry, it's a long night, and the nuns have stories. The bell rings again. Not a grand, echoing church bell this time, but a smaller hand bell, rung by Sister Beatrix, whose job it is to make sure no one lingers too long in the brew house pretending to clean ladles while secretly sampling. You wipe your hands on your robe and follow the others into the cloister walk, your feet padding over chilled flagstones as a fresh breeze stirs the hem of your habit. Time for the next task in this sacred shuffle, chores. Not glamorous ones. We're talking scrub the latrine, feed the goose, mend the sock kinds of chores. Except, of course, all done within the structure of divine routine. Because here, your day is not your own, it's borrowed from the Rule of St. Benedict, a 6th century guidebook for monastic life that somehow manages to be both deeply spiritual and impressively bossy. Your schedule is broken into chunks like a pie that's all crust and no sugar. Matins at midnight. Lauds at dawn. Prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and finally complin, each with its own prayers, chants and rituals. You won't get through any task without being interrupted by bells, and honestly, at some point you stop wondering what the hour is and just listen for instructions from whichever nun currently holds the schedule board. But in between those sacred moments, there is life, real, earthy, oddly rhythmic life, and much of it revolves around work. You help in the kitchen, peeling turnips and trying not to cry into the onions. Then it's off to the laundry, where you discover that washing linen in a wooden tub while chanting psalms requires upper body strength you simply do not possess. There's also the garden, rows of medicinal herbs like sage, rue, angelica, and something called blessed thistle, which sounds promising until you get pricked by it. Gardening is considered holy labour, and it's where you'll often find the quieter sisters who don't enjoy beer talk or ghost stories. They smile knowingly as they dig, as though each turn of the soil reveals secrets better left unspoken. Historians still argue whether the rigidity of monastic routines was more about cultivating spiritual focus or simply making sure no one had time to commit sins out of boredom. Either way, it works. You're far too busy hauling firewood and grinding mustard seed to even consider mischief, unless you count sneaking a honeyed fig from the pantry, which you absolutely do, and which the kitchen nun absolutely noticed. Now, let's talk about the most underrated role in the convent, the brewmaid. You don't just stir pots and stack wood, you maintain the tools, test grain quality, monitor fermentation temperatures by touch and instinct, and keep meticulous records in a leather-bound book that smells like barley and anxiety. In some convents, the brewmaid was second only to the abbess in authority, because let's face it, keeping everyone hydrated and mildly cheerful is no small task in the 12th century. And yes, before you ask, the beer varied in strength. There was the weaker, small ale, served daily, perfectly fine for sipping with pottage and bread, and then there were stronger batches, save for feast days, honoured guests, and possibly the occasional ghost story night. A few convents even earned a reputation for holy knockout ales, known to inspire visions, migraines, or both. You see, in these silent spaces full of devotion, brewing wasn't just physical, it was also symbolic. The process of transforming grain and water into something greater echoed spiritual rebirth. You crush, you boil, you wait. You strain, you store, you pray. And then, as if by miracle, something new bubbles forth. Sister Adalberta, the oldest nun in the abbey, says this is why brewing is women's work, because only women understand the patience of transformation. She also says beer is best when stirred clockwise by moonlight, but she's been wrong before, once confusing salt for yeast and briefly inventing a new form of penance ale. Still, there's something deeply comforting about the rhythm, the smell of wood smoke and yeast, the scrape of ladle on copper, the prayers sung just above a whisper as hands work in practiced harmony. You've never known such a peculiar blend of peace and purpose. You also never imagined you'd discuss work pH levels with someone who wears a scapular and believes angels help with fermentation timing, and when the chores pause for sext, the midday prayer, you sit on the chapel bench, hands still tingling from labour, back aching slightly, and listen to the echo of chants bouncing off the high stone walls. There's something haunting about the harmony, something that hums deep in your bones. Maybe it's exhaustion, or maybe it's the first whisper of a different kind of presence. Because later tonight, after the last bell, when the chores are done and the candles burn low, some of the sisters will gather, not for prayer, but for stories. You'll hear about the abbey shade, the white-cloaked woman who walks between the barrels, and the monk who died with a smile and hasn't stopped chuckling since. But we're not there yet. You still have to gather firewood, count dried hops, and feed Jerome the goose, who, by the way, hisses at you like you owe him money. Back in the brew house, the air is thick again, with steam and the earthy scent of wet grain. You're elbow deep in barley mash when Sister Eisentrude declares it's the perfect day for fermentation. You glance outside at the grey clouds and mild drizzle and nod solemnly, as though you understand why that matters. You don't. But the sisters speak of beer the way others speak of saints, reverently, cryptically, and always with a hint of gossip. This is where the true magic happens, not just in the boiling or the blessing, but in the waiting. Brewing is a slow art. After hours of stirring, boiling, and straining, the ale must be left to cool and ferment in large wooden vats, stored deep within the convent cellar. You carry heavy jugs down a damp staircase, your foot slipping slightly on the mossy edge. Down here, it's always a little too cold, a little too dark, and just eerie enough to make you quicken your step when alone. The beer, however, is divine. Literally, the nuns refer to it as liquid bread, packed with nutrients and surprisingly filling. It sustains them during Lenten fasts and long winter weeks when meat is off the table and vegetables are just a rumour. And it isn't just survival. There's real skill involved. Recipes differ by region and order. Some use gruit, an herb mixture including yarrow, mugwort and wild rosemary, while others lean toward hops, which are gaining popularity, though some traditionalists still insist they're too masculine for nunly brewing. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns were the original craft brewers of Europe. While monk-brewed beer gets most of the press, recent archival digs reveal entire convents producing far more than domestic sips. Some, like the Benedictine nuns of Andlau or the Cistercians in Bavaria, had operations robust enough to rival monastic breweries. They weren't just following recipes, they were innovating. Take Sister Apollonia, for example. She once brewed a batch using chamomile and fennel that made the bishop see stars, or possibly ancestors. He spent the rest of the feast in the library, discussing theology with a painting. Since then, the recipe has been strictly reserved for special holidays. You help ladle the wort into the cooling basins, steam rising around you in thick curls. Sister Magda sings as she stirs, her chant half prayer, half weather report. She insists that thunderstorms sour the brew. No one has disproven her yet, though one brave novice tried brewing during a passing squall and ended up with 38 bottles of fizzy, vinegar-like regret. The bottles are still stored in the corner, next to the barrel labelled, "Maybe don't." The camaraderie in the brewhouse is unlike any other room in the convent. It's warmer, for one, both in temperature and spirit. Laughter is quieter here, but more frequent. The sisters share tips, argue gently over yeast to grain ratios, and swap stories while they work. Some holy, some less so. You hear a tale about a nun who claimed to see the Virgin Mary in a vat of beer. The abbess said it was the foam, but the nun insisted it was a miracle. Either way, they drank the batch and felt blessedly dizzy. That's not to say there weren't limits. Beer was sacred, yes, but also heavily regulated. The abbess kept records, not just of ingredients and yields, but of who drank what and when. Too much ale, and you'd be reassigned to the latrine. Too little, and you risked dehydration. And of course, if the bishop visited, all the best barrels suddenly bore little plaques reading, "For ecclesiastical guests only." You've never seen anyone drink so slowly and so smugly as a bishop with a stein labelled exclusive. The fringe details of nun brewery culture are almost too delightful to believe. One abbey allegedly had a secret brew hymn sung only during fermentation. Another buried its best yeast starter in the crypt, believing it had absorbed the holiness of the saints below. You're not sure if this is folklore or fermentation myth, but either way, you make a mental note not to sip anything labelled Saint Starter. Still, the work is satisfying. You scrub the brew floor until your knees ache, then help grind herbs under the supervision of Sister Else, who insists each herb must be crushed until it repents. By evening, the ale is tucked safely away, bubbling quietly in the cellar like it's dreaming. Your robe is soaked through with beer mist, your fingers pruned from steam. You're tired, a little woozy, and weirdly proud. There's something deeply human about turning raw ingredients into sustenance, something nearly alchemical, and something very, very funny about realizing that the nun next to you, currently snoring in a sack of barley, once beat a rival monastery in a brewing contest, judged by wandering minstrels. Tomorrow, you'll help bottle the batch. For now, you trudge back through the stone halls to your shared dormitory, where the beds are wooden planks, stuffed with straw, and Sister Odile has once again hung her damp socks from the prayer bell. But your night isn't quite over. Not here. Not in a place where things go bump behind the brewing vats. Because in the stillness of post-Compline quiet, when even Jerome the goose has nodded off, the stories begin. You're curled up in your corner of the dormitory, a wool blanket scratching at your chin when you hear the first whisper. Not a spooky whisper, a human one. 2 bunks down, Sister Hildegard is telling Sister Clara about the healing batch. You half close your eyes, partly from exhaustion, partly because everyone knows the best stories come out when you're pretending to sleep. The healing batch was brewed 5 winters ago, or 7. Details shift. A small barrel of extra strong ale, infused with wild thyme, holy water, and a suspicious amount of honey. 1 sip was said to calm fevers. 2 sips, hallucinations of saints waving from the rafters. 3, well, the abbess made that mistake once and spent the next hour blessing the grain mill. You smile to yourself. This is where things begin to blur, the line between brewing and medicine. Because in this convent, beer isn't just for drinking. It's medicine, comfort, a kind of prayer you can swallow. At dawn, you join Sister Theodrada in the infirmary. The walls smell of lavender, vinegar, and that bitter, unmistakable sharpness of boiled barley. The sick lie in neat rows on wooden cots, bundled in wool. Some moan, others snore. A few glare at you as you slosh in with your bucket of medicinal ale, which honestly looks a lot like regular ale, just with a sprig of mint floating on top. Theodrada leans in and murmurs, "Say something holy while you serve it. The patients like that." So you offer a hesitant, "May St. Arnold keep your humours balanced," which earns a sleepy thumbs up from a man wrapped like a sausage in linen strips. St. Arnold, by the way, is the patron saint of hop pickers and brewers. He allegedly told his followers to drink beer, not water, during a plague outbreak, a suggestion that likely saved lives, given that boiling beer ingredients killed harmful microbes. Historians still argue whether this makes him a genius, a lucky guesser, or just extremely thirsty. The convent's ale is a miracle, depending on whom you ask. Sister Eisentrude claims her sciatica only flares when the hops are old. Sister Gerda swears her dreams are clearer after a mug of St. Hildegard's herbal recovery brew. And once, a goat with a limp was given a splash of leftover ale and ran 3 laps around the orchard before knocking over the bishop's horse. There's no doubt the nuns understand herbs. They've copied countless medical manuscripts, recipes for salves, syrups, tinctures, and brews. Some mixtures call for nettle, fennel, juniper, and comfrey. Others include stranger ingredients, powdered bone, soot, and in one alarming case, sun-dried mouse. That recipe has been mysteriously smudged in the record book, probably for the best. You help grind herbs in the infirmary's side room, where the mortar is as big as your head and twice as loud. The shelves here are crammed with labelled jars: angelica root, ox tongue, foxglove with a skull and cross symbol, and a mysterious blend simply labelled ale helper. You don't ask what's in it, you're not ready for that kind of knowledge. As you stir the day's brew, Sister Theodrada mentions that last week a traveller claimed to be cured of melancholic vapours after 2 mugs of the convent's darkest ale. You ask what melancholic vapours are. She just nods solemnly and mutters something about demons hiding in the spleen. There's science here, yes, but it's tangled with faith and folklore. You're not just brewing beer, you're warding off illness, preserving strength, and maybe, just maybe, inviting divine favour. After all, the rule of St. Benedict encourages labour as prayer, and what's more prayerful than stirring hope into a kettle of bubbling wort? Of course, the Abbey keeps its brewing records sealed. You're not allowed to copy the recipes. Some say the abbess once caught a friar snooping through the fermenting room and sent him home with an ale so sour it turned his tongue green. That's probably just convent myth. Probably. Still, it's not unusual for neighbouring villagers to request bottles from the healing cask, especially during winter. One elderly widow swears it cured her rheumatism. Another says it helped her see her dead husband, though she later admitted he was holding a fish and floating slightly above the firewood. Your favourite part of the infirmary, the shelf of saints' charms, tiny bone fragments, silver medallions, a dried sprig of rosemary tied with twine, supposedly blessed by a bishop who once cured hiccups by sneezing into a font. The sisters hang these over the beds during ale infusions, just in case the brew needs backup. It's all oddly touching, this blend of care, ritual, and barely scientific optimism. You realise that even the brewing process feels like medicine, like a remedy for more than just the body, for loneliness, for fear, for that deep tiredness that no amount of sleep can shake. You stir, and the ale responds. You hum a hymn, and the shadows in the corner seem to back off. By the end of the day, your sleeves are stained with herbs, and your fingers smell like licorice and smoke. You leave the infirmary with a bottle of leftover recovery batch, clearly labelled, "Do not drink after Vespers." Naturally, you tuck it under your bed, but tonight you won't need it. Tonight, there's something else waiting for you after Compline. A shadow in the cloister, a whisper behind the barrels, and maybe, just maybe, a ghost with a favourite ale. The Abbey goes silent after Compline. Not just quiet. Silent. No singing, no footsteps, no distant clang of firewood. Just the low creak of the dormitory beams and the occasional snore that sounds suspiciously like a duck. You lie still on your straw mattress, staring up at the rough wood above you, listening. And then, it begins. Not a scream or a clatter, just a story. Whispered, of course, always whispered. Sister Hedwig, the unofficial mistress of ghosts, starts it with her usual disclaimer. It only happened once, but Sister Blandina swore it happened to her. You perk up. Tonight's tale is about the wandering brewer, a pale figure in a soaked habit who roams the abbey cloisters during storms, rattling keys, looking for the recipe she forgot to write down before dying mid-brew. She appears only when the beer is particularly good, or particularly bad. Accounts differ. Sister Hedwig's voice drops a little lower. She was seen last winter, by the fermenting vats. And just like that, you're wide awake, because you were by those vats yesterday, alone, and you did hear something that sounded like bubbling and muttering. No one laughs at the ghost stories, not openly. Here, among women who speak to saints and brew by moon cycles, the line between sacred and strange is thinner than the veil on All Hallows' Eve. Ghosts are part of the rhythm, as natural as dawn prayers or herb picking.
Some sisters even leave out offerings, a crust of bread, a bit of ale, a candle stub, not because they're afraid, but because they feel sorry for the restless spirits, especially the ones who were once nuns themselves. There's the tale of Sister Amaltrude, who tried to translate a forbidden medical text and was found face down in the scriptorium with ink smudged all over her nose. Now her ghost supposedly rearranges the scrolls at night, always spelling out a warning in Latin that no one can quite translate. It's either do not disturb or try the Brewed blend with honey. Depends on the scholar. Historians still argue whether these stories were cautionary tales, emotional coping mechanisms, or just a very creative way to pass long winter nights. Whatever the case, convents across Europe kept records of visions, unusual sightings, even objects moving on their own, always written in neat handwriting, always couched in the language of divine mystery.
You try to sleep. You really do. But the wind whistles under the door, and you start thinking about that time earlier in the cellar, when the candle flickered in a place with no draught. By midnight, you're bundled in your cloak and sneaking down the steps. The convent at night is another world. Shadows stretch like ribbons. Every sound is magnified. You hear the ticking of a leaky cask, the squeak of a distant hinge, and then a knock. You freeze. Was that? It happens again. 2 slow, deliberate knocks. You grip your candle. It's coming from behind the barrels, from the space marked, "Do not open unless the ghost knocks twice." You consider your options. Go back to bed and pretend this didn't happen. Sensible, very sleep-conducive. Or slide aside the barrel, heart thudding like a badly tuned drum. You do it, because of course you do. Behind the barrel is a small alcove, damp, cobwebbed, and empty. Almost. In the corner, you find a tiny bottle, sealed with wax, labelled in a handwriting you don't recognise. Sister Adelgun's final batch. You don't open it, not yet, maybe never, but you carry it upstairs like a relic, like a secret passed between centuries. Back in bed, the candle guttering beside you, you finally drift off. Half dreaming, you imagine Sister Adelgund leaning over a vat, muttering to herself about barley ratios, ghost-proof hops, and how unfair it is that monks get all the credit. The wind taps at the window. A loose shutter creaks. Somewhere in the distance, Jerome the goose honks once. You smile into your pillow, because here, in this quiet, cloistered world, the ghosts are not frightening. They're co-workers, brewing partners, maybe even roommates, and they tell excellent stories. By morning, the ghost bottle has mysteriously vanished from your bedside table. You sit up, groggily, blanket twisted around your legs, and blink into the thin grey light filtering through the dormitory window. Either someone took it, or Sister Adelgund came to reclaim her masterpiece. You don't ask around. That would break the rule of post-midnight mysteries. If something disappears and no one saw it, you probably weren't supposed to keep it. Instead, you head to breakfast. It's porridge again. Always porridge. Slightly grey, possibly cursed, definitely nutritious. You spoon it slowly as the nuns around you exchange raised eyebrows and small smirks. Clearly, someone else heard the knocking last night. After breakfast, it's your turn to help in the dormitory hall. Bed making, lice checking, and candle snuffing. Not thrilling work, but there's a rhythm to it. That is, until Sister Clarissa pulls you aside with wide eyes and a whisper, "They're back." You know immediately what she means. The dormitory demons. Now let's pause. These are not the horned, red-skinned monsters of Dante's nightmares. These are nun-approved demons, more annoying than dangerous, more mischievous than malevolent. The kind that tug your blankets at night or hide your sandals behind the baptismal font, but still deeply unsettling when you're half asleep and suddenly feel someone breathing near your ear. According to the sisters, the dormitory demons only show up when too many stories are told in 1 week. They feed on imagination, which, in this convent, makes them extremely well fed. One nun insists she once saw a small figure perched on the rafters, eating candle wax and laughing. Another swears her mattress lifted 3 inches off the floor during Advent. Sister Bertha, ever the skeptic, says it's all indigestion. She's the only one who sleeps with garlic under her pillow, just in case. Historians still argue whether medieval accounts of demons in convents were symbolic, psychological, or the result of mildly alcoholic ale consumed too near bedtime. In truth, many convent manuscripts include entries describing nocturnal disturbances, icy draughts, phantom hands, strange animal sounds. These weren't necessarily seen as sinful hallucinations. They were part of the spiritual landscape, a test, a trial, an extremely inconvenient haunting. You're sent to the scriptorium to distract yourself. Ah, the scriptorium. Rows of heavy desks, open windows that let in chilly drafts, and the ever-present scratching of quills on parchment. Ink stains everything. Your fingers, your sleeves, occasionally your face. You help Sister Scholastica copy a prayer cycle while she casually tells you about the time her inkwell spilled into the shape of the devil's ears. You pause. What do the devil's ears look like? She shrugs, very pointy. The scriptorium, for all its solemnity, is also the epicenter of whispered stories. Nuns copy theological texts, sure, but also bestiaries, miracle tales, saintly visions, and, when the abbess isn't watching, accounts of exorcisms, unexplained illnesses, and one memorable scroll about a demon that lived in a cheese wheel. That one got smudged and banned, but everyone still quotes it during lunch. Today, you're tasked with organizing the loose folios in the archive closet. You step into the cramped space and immediately regret it. It smells like dust, mildew, and something slightly coppery, maybe ink, maybe not. Inside, you find a stack of documents marked Dormitorium Events. You flip through them with growing fascination. Here's one. Night of the Shaking Bed. Sister Walpurga reports her straw mattress levitated 3 finger widths during compline. No witnesses. Possible divine warning for gluttony. Or structural flaw in bed slats. Next page. Incident of whispering candles. Several sisters reported hearing their names whispered by candle flames. All candles extinguished immediately. Sister Apollonia suggested ale purity test. And another. Goose appears in dream, speaks Latin. No further explanation. You close the folder gently and place it back. You exit the archive to find Sister Claricia waiting outside, holding your missing bottle. You dropped this, she says with a perfectly innocent smile. You open your mouth to ask how she found it, but she's already walking away, humming something that sounds suspiciously like a brewing chant. That night in the dormitory, no one talks of ghosts, but someone tucks garlic beneath your blanket, just in case. You lie awake, heart calm, brain humming with visions of floating beds and demon cheese. Somewhere, far off, you hear a faint hiccup, probably Jerome the Goose, probably. But then again, it is story season, and in this convent, stories have a way of coming to life. Morning arrives on the wings of incense and cold feet. You groggily join the procession for prime, blinking at the sunrise slicing through the chapel windows like an overzealous sermon. The prayers wash over you, calm, melodic, and in Latin, but your mind drifts. You're still thinking about last night's archives and about the cheese demon, mostly the cheese demon. After the service, you're sent to the scriptorium annex, a quieter, draftier room near the back of the abbey where less official texts are kept. Translation: it's where the interesting stuff lives. You light a candle and start sorting parchment, most of it standard fare, sermons, saint biographies, a very stern letter from a bishop about overly festive ale. But then your fingers brush something stranger, a manuscript, slightly singed at the corners, bound in faded red leather with a crude ink title on the cover. Creatures and Warnings of the Western Forest. You flip it open. First page, a badly drawn owl with 4 eyes and a speech bubble that simply says, "Flee." You've struck gold. This is the convent's shadow library, the unofficial collection. Here, the sisters keep folktales, strange dreams, miracle logs, and bestiaries full of half-remembered creatures that sound like someone misheard a monk telling a bedtime story. There's a snake with wheels, a donkey that turns into a bishop at dawn, a spirit called the Sigh that lives in chimneys and only steals your voice on Wednesdays. You're hooked. Sister Scholastica wanders in, spots the book in your hands, and raises an eyebrow. "Ah," she says, "the werewolf file." You pause. "There's a werewolf file?" She sits beside you and opens to the middle of the book. There it is, of the nun who was a wolf on feast days. According to the entry, Sister Bertilda would disappear during Maida celebrations, only to be seen later running through the orchard on all fours, howling the vespers. She always returned with muddy robes and twigs in her veil. Some said she was cursed. Others swore she was blessed with holy wildness. Historians still argue whether this account was metaphorical, medicinal, or just inspired by very strong feast day ale, but it's not alone. Many convents recorded animal transformations, nightly visions, and even familiar spirits, often blending scripture with local folk beliefs. You turn the pages and find more oddities. A rooster that predicted rain by reading psalms backwards, a fog that erased the memory of a sermon but left the smell of cloves, a woman who claimed a snail whispered Latin riddles to her while she gardened. These aren't jokes, not to the nuns. They're mysteries, puzzle pieces, proof that the world is wider than scripture suggests. In a society where most women were kept away from books, abbeys gave nuns access to knowledge. They weren't just passive readers, they were copyists, editors, and sometimes even authors. They translated ancient texts, added their own commentary, and occasionally inserted marginal doodles that historians now debate with great seriousness. Is that rabbit in the corner praying? Or breakdancing? Hard to say. You come across a tale scribbled in different ink, the spirit of the brew. It tells of a nun who whispered to her brewing vat and received advice in return. Recipes, warnings, even gossip about the abbess. The spirit eventually disappeared, the entry says, after being insulted by a novice who added too much sage. The margins are filled with tiny notes in newer hands. Don't use sage, one says. Another simply reads, true. It's clear the sisters used this library not just to preserve stories, but to test them, to pass them down. Some are dated, some are fresh, some have fingerprints still smudged into the ink. By afternoon, you're dizzy with delight and dust. Sister Scholastica pats your shoulder. That's enough shadows for today, she says gently, taking the manuscript and slipping it back into its hidden nook behind a broken lectern. You rise, bones cracking like old wood. Outside, the sky is darkening again, clouds overhead, rain smells in the air. A good day for fermentation, or apparently folklore. That evening, you overhear a few novices talking about a new scratching noise behind the laundry wall. Could be rats, one shrugs. Could be the donkey bishop, another whispers. You say nothing, but as you pass the cloister on your way to Compline, you pause by the herb garden and look toward the trees. Something rustles, low to the ground, four-legged. Could be a dog, could be Sister Bertilda. You don't wait to find out. Back inside, the candles flicker warmly. You settle into your straw mattress, heart steady, eyes heavy. The shadow library will be there tomorrow, waiting, like everything else in this place, just beyond the veil. You wake to the scent of thyme and toast. Sister Walburger has burned breakfast again, which means the dining hall smells like a medieval forest caught fire. Still, no one complains, because today's breakfast comes with a bonus, story time. Not ghost stories, for once. Holy stories, though here, the line between holy and haunted often depends on who's telling it and how much sleep they've had. You sit near the hearth, cradling a cup of weak ale, and listen as Sister Oda begins a tale. Her voice is raspy like someone who gargled with chalk. Her hands move while she speaks as though shaping the air around the words. This, she says, is the story of the luminous frog. You choke on your sip. She continues. Once, in a village not far from here, a child fell into the well. They sent for a holy woman from the nearby convent. She threw down a glowing frog she had kept in a jar, and the frog hopped across the water, lighting the way. The child climbed out by its light. The frog vanished. Some say it was a blessing, others say it was the blessing. No one laughs, not even you, because in this world, full of relics and rituals, of smoke and scripture, strange things don't get explained. They get written down, they get passed along, they get believed. A little. Later, in the garden, you work alongside Sister Ida, planting rosemary and pulling up stubborn weeds with roots deeper than some family feuds. She tells you about the fairies, but very matter-of-factly. They don't like iron, she says, or sandals. You ask why sandals. She shrugs. Too loud. It turns out that folklore lives here, not in dusty corners, but everywhere. It's in the herbs, the footpaths, the odd rules about not whistling after dusk. The nuns follow scripture, yes, but they also follow weather signs, dream symbols, and animal behavior. and they see no contradiction in that. Historians still argue whether this mix of belief systems was tolerated or quietly discouraged. The church tried often to suppress superstition, but in rural convents like this one, where priests visited only once a season and miracles were expected to bloom alongside the lavender, the sisters wrote their own theology. You're given a new task, decorating prayer scrolls for the upcoming feast day. Sister Armantrude hands you a quill and a half-dried sheet of instructions that may have once been blessed by someone's cousin who met a bishop. You settle into the warm scriptorium with a table of others, all hunched over parchment, humming tunelessly. The scrolls are mostly standard: psalms, benedictions, a list of ingredients for the feast day loaf, accidentally filed with the prayers again. But here and there, in the margins, you catch tiny illustrations. One shows a nun chasing a squirrel with a halo, another a brewing kettle with wings, and one, boldest of all, depicts a figure sitting at a table with a ghost, sharing what appears to be beer. These images aren't part of any official doctrine, but they're left there, preserved, not erased, because in this abbey, stories aren't just for entertainment. They're tools for teaching, for warning, for remembering. That time the candle snuffed itself during Vespers, written down. That dream about a lion giving someone life advice in perfect Latin, marginal note, bottom right. And then there are the objects. In the reliquary, nestled among bone fragments and holy thimbles, you find a tiny jar labelled Wind, caught during Pentecost. The jar is sealed tight. No one knows what's inside. No one dares open it. Next to it, a feather, supposedly fallen from the wing of an angel that passed overhead during the Feast of the Visitation. It looks suspiciously like a pigeon feather. Still, you don't say anything. You simply nod. At supper, the abbess reads from the Chronicles of Odd Events, a convent tradition. Each entry is anonymous, signed only with a date, June 4th. All the ale in barrel 7 turned clear. Tastes like pears. No one knows why. October 10th. Novice saw a figure in the orchard hovering. Might have been fog, might not. January 22nd. Someone keeps whispering, check the sourdough during matins. You chew your bread slowly. The night winds howl louder. The hearth crackles. Someone drops a spoon, and no one dares pick it up. After prayers, you sneak one more glance at the reliquary. The jar of Pentecost wind hasn't moved, but you could swear the feather's angle is different. You walk back to bed, heart strangely full, because here, among these strange, steady women, you've learned something important. Belief isn't always about certainty. Sometimes it's just about holding the mystery gently, about recording it in the margin. You climb into bed. The wind rattles the shutters once, then again, and you think, maybe you'll leave a crust of bread by the window, just in case the luminous frog gets hungry. You've spent so many days now in the rhythm of the abbey. Prayers, brewing, ghost stories, garden weeds, scrolls, that when things go wrong it's almost refreshing, like a thunderstorm after too many polite sunny afternoons. It begins with the smell, not the usual earthy sweetness of barley or the herbal tingle of rosemary. No, this is sour, aggressive, and slightly alarming, like vinegar and cabbage decided to start a fight. You follow your nose, along with several curious nuns, into the cellar. There, standing before the row of brewing barrels, is Sister Petronilla, arms folded, lips pressed, eyes narrowed at barrel 9. Something's gone off, she says, pointing, in spirit and in flavour. She cracks the lid. The scent erupts like a failed blessing. You all take a step back. Barrel 9 is, how do we put this, sentiently bad. The foam is twitching. The colour is wrong. The consistency is closer to porridge than ale, and it's making a hissing noise, like it's breathing or considering vengeance. No one speaks. Finally, the abbess is summoned. She arrives, takes one look, and says solemnly, well, we won't serve that on feast day. They seal the barrel. Then, as is tradition, they hold a small exorcism. It's not dramatic, just a sprinkling of holy water, a muttered psalm, and a candle set near the lid. Sister Claricia ties a ribbon around it, for luck, though she admits red may have been a poor choice. Barrel 9 is wheeled into the storage crypt, next to the ghost batch and the mysterious unlabeled jug that hisses when it's cold. You'd think the excitement would end there, but that night, the noises begin. At first, it's just a tapping sound, then a soft gurgle, then, distinctly, a giggle. You and 2 others sneak down after Compline. You find the ribbon untied, the candle burned upside down, and a message scratched into the side of the barrel in what appears to be dried wart. Not done yet. Historians still argue whether such events were exaggerated to instill reverence or simply to liven up what was, let's face it, a deeply repetitive existence. But convents across Europe have brew-gone-wrong records, ales that boiled without fire, beers that turned black overnight, batches that smelled like honey but tasted like brimstone. Sister Magda insists it's a lesson in humility. Even nuns, she says, must not anger the yeast. After the incident, stricter brewing rules are posted. No brewing during thunderstorms, no singing secular songs near the wort, no adding personal blessings unless cleared by the abbess, absolutely no whispering secrets into the fermentation tanks. You're put on cooling duty, a safer task that involves pouring lukewarm water around barrels and offering gentle encouragement. You take this very seriously. You hum psalms, you pat the barrel lids, you avoid looking at barrel 9, which is now under surveillance by Jerome the Goose. Still, the convent's mood shifts. The beer isn't fermenting right. Bread rises too quickly, ink smears on dry parchment. A cat shows up, uninvited, and sits directly in the center of the chapel during prayer. It stares at everyone like it knows your secrets. Sister Walburga blames barrel 9. It's leaking bad luck, she says, through the air. The abbess reluctantly agrees to a full ritual cleanse of the brewhouse. Candles are lit, psalms are chanted, even the stirring paddles are sprinkled with holy water. It's deeply serious and slightly ridiculous. Sister Gerda accidentally blesses a ladle so intensely it refuses to sink in the kettle afterward. But it works. The scent clears. The next batch of ale bubbles like it's happy to be alive. Bread behaves. The cat leaves. Even barrel 9 seems quiet. Until someone opens it and finds it empty. No foam, no sludge, no message. Just a faint, lingering scent of honey and pepper. They reseal it. They label it, "Do not open until canonization of Saint Hildegard." Which could be never or tomorrow. With saints, you never know. You return to your normal duties, stirring, praying, listening to stories. But every so often, you catch a sister glancing down at the cellar door, as if waiting for a gurgle, or a sigh, or a message in bubbles. Because here, in a place where saints are real and shadows are polite, even bad beer deserves a second chance. It's the last day of harvest week, and the air is thick with wood smoke, mashed apples, and the faint, sharp twang of nettle. Everyone's busy. Sister Hedwig is peeling carrots with alarming speed. Sister Gerda is baking what appears to be either a ceremonial loaf or a defensive weapon. And you're helping bottle this season's finest brew, the good batch, the one that doesn't hiss. You and Sister Claricia line the long wooden table, filling bottles from a copper spout that burps cheerfully between each pour. The ale is golden, slightly cloudy, with a scent of rosemary and something vaguely citrus. No one remembers adding citrus, but no one dares question it either. "Smells like confidence," Claricia says. You nod, then whisper, "Do you think it's haunted confidence?" She doesn't laugh, just labels the bottle, "Festival Blend, handle with song." As the day winds down, the abbey buzzes with quiet energy. Not excitement exactly, this is a cloister, not a tavern, but something warmer, a shared understanding that for tonight, after Vespers, and before the winds rise too sharp, there will be stories. You gather in the chapter house where the fire crackles and candles burn low. The sisters sit in semicircles, wrapped in shawls, cups in hand. Tonight's brew is stronger than usual, special occasion. And the tales? Even older than the abbey. Sister Odelia begins with the nun who swallowed a moonbeam. Then Sister Scholastica follows with the broom that knew Latin. Someone recalls a dream of a floating bishop. Another swears she saw a mouse carry a communion wafer into the wall and return glowing faintly. The abbess listens with a half smile, pretending not to hear. And then it's your turn. You clear your throat. You've been practicing all week. This, you begin, is the tale of the whispering kettle, a brewing vessel that spoke only when ignored, that bubbled messages into its steam, that foretold feast day weather by spitting once for sunshine, twice for rain. It once spat 3 times and caused a chicken uprising, or so the story goes. They love it, not because it's true, but because it might be. And in a convent like this, where daily life brushes gently against the edge of legend, might is more than enough. Historians still argue whether these tales were ever believed outright, or if they served as sacred distractions, a kind of holy theatre to fill the long nights. But here, under firelight and the soft haze of herbal ale, belief doesn't need proof, it just needs company. You feel it then, that rare moment when time flattens, when the past, the present, the unreal and the sacred all share the same wooden bench. A warm room, a bubbling barrel, a story passed from one cracked voice to another. The fire burns lower, someone hums. The wind rises outside, combing through the trees like fingers. And just before you rise to leave, you glance toward the cellar stairs. The ribbon on barrel 9 is gone again. You say nothing. So now, let the abbey fade behind you. Feel the fire die down, the stories settle into the stones, and the night wrap itself gently around the walls. The bells are quiet, the brewing vats rest. Even barrel 9 sleeps, we think. The sisters have gone to bed. You hear soft breathing, a snuffle, maybe a goose honking one last thought into the dark. Even the ghosts, if they're still wandering, seem drowsy, tucked into shadowy corners with cups of imaginary ale. Your body relaxes into the straw mattress beneath you. The blanket's weight presses just enough to hold you in place, like a firm, friendly reminder that you are here and safe and done for the day. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, catching on branches like fingers through hair. You can almost hear it murmuring. Not words, but something older. A hush, a lull, a slow, smiling exhale from the earth itself. You did good work. You listened, you stirred, you laughed, you believed. Just enough to make space for magic, but not enough to stop asking questions. And now, you rest. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts wander. Past the cloisters, past the bubbling barrels, into soft fields where moonlight kisses barley, and dreams smell faintly of yeast and ink. Sleep, friend. The ghosts will keep watch tonight. The palace air is thick with incense and desert heat. You stand barefoot on polished alabaster, robes lightly rustling, as servants move silently around you. You're heading to bed, but it's not the flop-down, pull-the-covers affair you might imagine. In fact, the pharaoh's bed isn't even what you'd call soft. The mattress is elevated, carved from cedar, and gilded with gold leaf. Beautiful? Yes. Comfy? Only if you enjoy sleeping on art. The frame is low and stiff, raised just enough to allow air to circulate beneath. Cooling breezes from carefully placed openings glide over your feet. You lie down slowly, adjusting your limbs, as though preparing for a very stylish mummy photo shoot. And then there's the pillow, or rather, the headrest. It's not fluffy. It's not even flat. It's a curved stone or wood pedestal shaped like a saddle, meant to cradle your neck while elevating your skull. Why? Because the Egyptians believed the head was sacred, the seat of divine essence. Can't just let that roll around on linen like a common melon. You try to get comfortable. Your spine feels like it's lying on a ceremonial breadboard. But hey, you're royalty. Your job is to model the ideal human form, even in sleep. Nearby, your sandals sit neatly aligned with a carved ivory stool. On it, a small gold tray holds a sip of date wine and a piece of fig cake, just enough to sweeten your breath for the gods, who may pop in unannounced during your dreams. The walls around you? Covered in intricate painted murals, stars drifting across dark ceilings, lotus flowers blooming near sacred cows. Historians still argue whether these decorations were purely symbolic or helped induce lucid dreaming. Either way, it's a lot to look at when you're trying to wind down. You breathe in. The scent of frankincense clings to everything, your linens, your hands, even your eyebrows. A servant adjusts the curtain, filtering the moonlight just right. It gleams off your gold toe ring. No one mentions it, but yes, you're wearing one. Standard issue. Suddenly, the silence is broken by a soft tap, tap, tap. It's the royal chamberlain announcing that the purification priest is ready. Of course he is. You haven't even begun the real rituals yet. But for now, you're here, lying as still as a painted pharaoh on a tomb wall. The bed feels a little less stiff. The air moves like a whisper. You shift your neck against the cold curve of the headrest and try not to think about the fact that this exact sleeping position is also used for burial. Still, you're not dead. You're just mostly horizontal, kind of regal, and definitely hoping no one drops a scorpion in your sandals overnight. The room hasn't cooled much. Even with its sandstone walls and strategically placed vents, Egyptian nights can feel like you're sleeping inside a slow cooker. But heat is part of the ritual. Sweat is cleansing after all. And as you lie on your golden breadboard of a bed, it's time for the next phase of your royal bedtime routine. Becoming a human perfume tray. A procession of attendants shuffles in, each one carrying tiny alabaster jars. The air turns syrupy with scent. Myrrh, cinnamon, lotus, frankincense, and a few ingredients modern noses probably wouldn't recognize. One servant holds a long-handled ivory wand and begins dabbing a thick paste just below your ears. It tingles, burns a little, and smells like the kind of spice that could summon a god, or scare off a mosquito. Possibly both. These ointments aren't just for hygiene, they're symbolic. You are being scented into a state of divine readiness. In the ancient Egyptian worldview, sleeping was a rehearsal for dying. Each night you crossed into the duat, the underworld, only to return if the gods deemed you worthy. So you had to smell the part, no pressure. Your armpits are anointed with cinnamon oil. Your temples get hit with kifi, a mixture made from wine, raisins, honey, and 16 other ingredients crushed together until it becomes the world's most expensive dab of aromatherapy goo. Historians still argue whether kifi was used more as medicine or as a spiritual portal. Either way, you're now both fragrant and faintly sticky. At your feet, an attendant slowly fans a folded palm frond. Another unrolls a small scroll, muttering phrases that blend devotion and dermatology. May your pores open to Ra, may your blemishes not shame the night. It's oddly comforting. You've had worse spa days. Then comes the eyebrow oil. Apparently, gods notice eyebrows. The mixture here contains crushed galena, a lead-based mineral that gives your brows a metallic sheen. The downside? Well, you're technically smearing poison on your face, but the upside? You sparkle like a divine beetle under moonlight. Now someone's opening the crocodile dung jar. Yes, that's real. A special ointment made from powdered crocodile dung and milk is dabbed, gently, thankfully, along your torso. Egyptians believed it offered protection from disease, spirits, and possibly unwanted bedfellows. The smell is not ideal. But at this point, your olfactory system has either given up or ascended to another plane entirely. You blink. Your eyes feel heavy, not from tiredness, but from the perfumed smoke curling through the room. Braziers of incense send ribbons of sandalwood and pine toward the high ceiling, swirling around images of Nut, the sky goddess. Her outstretched body forms the ceiling itself, stars painted across her belly, a sleepy smile on her face. If anyone understands bedtime, it's Nut. Every now and then you hear a bell chime. That's the perfumer's assistant, marking the passage of each stage in the ritual. You are now officially marinated. If you stood up too quickly, you'd probably slide out of your sandals. A breeze stirs the curtains again. Somewhere in the distance, a hippo grunts in the Nile. It's not close, but it's definitely loud enough to ruin a nap. Ancient Egyptians had a complicated relationship with hippos. They were sacred, feared, and known to be terrible neighbours. You shift on your hard mattress, letting the last of the unguents settle. It's like sleeping in a spice rack. But underneath the heavy air and weirder ingredients, there's a rhythm forming, a flow of scent and silence, of ceremonial touches and soft words whispered in your name. And then, just when you think it's over, someone approaches with a final vial. This one is small, dark, and sealed with a wax lotus. The attendant cracks it open and touches the tiniest drop to your wrists. It's blue lotus oil, mildly narcotic, mildly euphoric, and deeply connected to dreams. You close your eyes, not because you're sleepy, but because everything else feels slightly unreal. You are no longer entirely here, nor entirely human. You're something fragrant, golden, sacred, and just a little bit oily. Your skin glistens like a sacred papyrus scroll left out in the morning dew. You smell like an exotic garden that caught fire and then tried to apologize. And now, finally, it's time for phase 3. Spiritual foot maintenance and a skincare routine that might alarm a modern dermatologist. Enter the purification priests. These aren't your high-drama temple priests with golden leopard stoles. These are the more practical ones, part chaplain, part pedicurist, tasked with keeping your body temple-ready for its nightly voyage into the land of the dead. They come barefoot, heads shaved, linen robes immaculate. You wonder if they sleep at all, or just hover eternally in corridors waiting for ankles to bless. One kneels beside your bed and begins to wash your feet with water poured from a sacred alabaster flask. The water is cold, intentionally. The shock is meant to jolt your car, your spiritual essence, into alertness. You try not to kick him. Another priest chants softly while waving a feather wand over your toes. The fan is from a sacred ibis, and it smells faintly of lemon. You aren't sure if the chant is a blessing, a warning, or a very committed lullaby. It goes on for a while, then stops mid-sentence. No one explains why. And here's where things take a turn for the weird. A small copper mirror is held under your nose, not to check if you're breathing, but to reflect any wandering spirits that might try to sneak into your dreams. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic protection or an early version of sleep paralysis therapy. Either way, your nose feels important. Next comes the salve. It's thick, gritty, and smells like boiled onions and mint. It's made from crushed malachite mixed with animal fat and desert herbs, meant to protect your skin against both evil forces and dryness. It's smeared down your legs and arms with reverence. You're beginning to feel like a marinated statue. Then comes the neck charm. A string of tiny amulets, carved frogs, cobras, ankh symbols, and a little scarab beetle with a sleepy smile is draped around your collarbone, not for style. These are your nighttime guardians. Should a rogue demon wander into your dreams, it now has to face a clay frog named Wegaf, who radiates protective vibes. A servant approaches with a small bowl of something that looks like green hummus. It's not for eating. It's a paste made from fig sap and ground barley, rubbed on your chest to seal in breath. Egyptians took nighttime very seriously. You hear a sudden bark of laughter, not yours. One of the younger priests just stepped in sandal first into a trail of spilled incense ash. A quick glare from the elder silences him, but a corner of your mouth curls upward. Even pharaohs appreciate a bit of chaos. Now someone brings the crocodile oil. Again. Yes, this isn't the same as earlier. This oil is ritual grade, pressed from the fat of sacred crocodiles raised in temple pools. Apparently, it's believed to contain the essence of Sobek, the crocodile god of strength and protection. A few drops are rubbed on your chest, as if the gods themselves are tucking you in. The scent is swampy with a hint of sandalwood. They finish with your hands. First a wash, then the gentle placement of rings, each one inscribed with protective hieroglyphs. One bears the eye of Horus, another a depiction of Isis breastfeeding baby Horus. A third, curiously, features a cat batting at a sun disk. You suspect the artisan had a sense of humour. The room grows quieter. The priests bow low, then leave one by one. No doors slam, no sandals squeak. Just the slow hush of retreating linen and fading prayers. You're left alone again. But not really. Around you, the air still shimmers with oils and meaning. Your feet tingle from their icy bath. The bed's still unforgiving, but somehow this process, odd as it is, makes you feel more than royal. It makes you feel anchored, not just to this moment, but to some ancient rhythm of breath, skin, gods, and dust. And as you exhale, you swear you feel the amulet frog throb slightly against your chest, probably just your heartbeat. Probably. You lie still, your limbs heavy with oils, your brow glistening with frankincense. The chamber hums with that peculiar silence only palaces manage. Too quiet to trust, yet oddly soothing. And now, with your body thoroughly marinated and blessed, it's time for the part of the routine that makes bedtime feel more like a therapy session. Talking to statues. Yes, you have bedtime confessions. But instead of a journal or a kindly therapist, you speak to a carved head of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and scribes. He's perched on a stand by your bedside, his stone beak slightly chipped from centuries of devotion. His eyes, painted with lapis and onyx, stare into the eternal void, or directly into your soul, depending on how much blue lotus you inhaled earlier. You lean slightly, just enough to rest your lips near the statue's ears. Technically, he doesn't have ears, but spiritually, he hears everything. This is the part of the night where you unburden yourself. Minor wrongdoings, unresolved quarrels, that time you forgot a priest's name mid-ceremony and just called him Papyrus Guy. You confess not because you're in trouble, but because the ancient Egyptians believed words had power. Spoken words shaped reality, even dreams. And so, each night, you whisper your regrets and wishes, hoping Thoth scribbles them down for Ra's review during tomorrow's solar commute. The chamber remains dim, the torchlight swaying gently. You glance up, and there he is, another statue, Osiris, serene and green-skinned, his arms crossed as if already sleeping. You don't speak to him. He listens in silence, being the god of the underworld and all. Too much conversation with Osiris and people start asking questions. Behind him, a painted relief of the goddess Mart watches you. Her ostrich feather quivers slightly in the breeze, though that might just be the oil fan swaying again. Still, you get the feeling she's judging the sincerity of your confessions. It's fine, you meant it. Probably. Then you do something that, if done in any modern bedroom, would get you strange looks. You extend your hand and touch the cool stone of the statue's base. Not knocking, not praying, just grounding. The ancient Egyptians believed this act helped tether the ka, your spiritual double, to your physical self before sleep. Because the last thing you want is your spirit wandering off unsupervised. Historians still argue whether these nightly statue confessions were symbolic, or if the pharaohs truly believed they were heard and answered in real time. Either way, no one's ever found a "do not disturb" sign carved into a god's pedestal. You sigh. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because there's a weird comfort in being one part monarch, one part whispered poem. You've unburdened your thoughts, cleansed your body, and quite possibly creeped out an entire pantheon with your nightly ramble. Suddenly, there's movement in the shadows. But don't worry, it's just the servant responsible for adjusting the statue's orientation. Yes, someone's job is to make sure Thoth is always angled precisely toward the east, so that when you sleep, your prayers rise with the morning sun. You murmur one last thing, a thank you, maybe, or a wish for dreamless rest, or possibly a reminder to yourself not to overdo the crocodile balm tomorrow night. And then you roll slightly, back to your stiff gold frame bed, leaving the stone audience in your spiritual rear view. The room smells of incense, stone, and old thoughts. You're not sure if you feel lighter or simply more ancient. Above you, the ceiling begins to glow faintly, not with real light, but painted light. The stars have arrived. You're still lying flat, shoulders sunk into linen, neck arched on that unyielding headrest, when your gaze drifts upward to the ceiling. And there, above you, the heavens are painted in blue and gold. The goddess Nut stretches across the plaster in human form, her elongated body curving protectively from wall to wall. Her arms and legs touch the edges of the chamber like a canopy. Across her body, stars, tiny dots of white and yellow that gleam faintly in the flicker of torchlight. This isn't decoration, it's your calendar, your compass, your sky map for the night. You count the stars above Nut's outstretched arms, a meditative ritual practiced by insomniac pharaohs for centuries. Every point of light corresponds to a specific moment in the sky's eternal dance. Ancient priests would recite these constellations aloud, like a bedtime story written in orbit. Tonight's star, Sar, the precursor to Orion, rises just behind Nut's elbow. Good omen, supposedly. Unless it isn't. Historians still argue which star positions were auspicious and which just meant, watch out for crocodiles tomorrow. Your servant/astronomer tiptoes into the chamber, carrying a palm-sized bronze device. Not a clock. Clocks didn't exist quite yet. This is a maquette, an ancient tool that uses stars and a weighted plumb line to tell time. He kneels beside your bed, lines it up with a slit in the ceiling, and mutters something about fourth hour of the night. You nod, pretending to understand. You don't, but it sounds official. The ceiling isn't just celestial, it's prophetic. Painted on one edge is the journey of Ra's solar boat through the Duat. Each night the sun god sails through darkness, battling serpents, demons, and the occasional bureaucratic delay, before being reborn at dawn. As Pharaoh, you are connected to this journey. You're supposed to ride with Ra, to protect him, to make sure the sun comes back. No pressure. And that's why you sleep facing east. Your head points towards sunrise. Always. The orientation aligns your body with sacred geometry and prepares your soul for its nightly commute into the underworld. It also ensures that if someone tries to assassinate you in your sleep, they trip over your feet first. Practical and mystical. You turn your eyes toward the side wall, where a painted procession of baboons raises their tiny hands to greet the morning sun. This is not a joke. Sacred baboons were believed to sing at sunrise. Some pharaohs kept them as temple mascots. Others tried and regretted it. You've heard stories of one baboon who bit 3 scribes before breakfast, but tonight, the baboons on your wall are quiet, their hands raised in frozen devotion, their painted fur catching the flicker of your dying torch. You exhale slowly. The scent of kaifi lingers in the air. You wonder what dream awaits. A boat voyage with Ra, a stroll through the fields of reeds, or maybe just that recurring one where you forget your temple speech and show up in only a linen sash. Your astronomer whispers something about the dog star rising. Sirius, the bringer of the Nile flood. You nod again. This time, the name sticks. You've heard the elders say that when Sirius appears, all things renew. Crops, dreams, even tired kings. You blink. The ceiling stars seem to shimmer in rhythm with your breath. Nut's eyes stare downward, protective and distant. There's something strangely reassuring about sleeping under a painted goddess. She's always watching, she's always there. Outside, the palace wall creaks slightly, as wind shifts through the palm trees. A quiet note of reed flute drifts in from a distant guard post. You imagine he's playing to stay awake, but it works for you too. You let your fingers trace a line along the blanket. Linen woven so finely it could pass for silk. It smells of lotus and starch. Everything here is intentional. Every sound, every scent, every star. You are Pharaoh. You are map and myth and mortal, all at once. And as your eyelids lower, Nut's constellation-covered belly glows above you, like a lullaby stretched across the sky. You stir slightly, not from noise or discomfort, but because something shifts in the air. A gentle clink, a rustle, the scent of honeyed dates wafting past your nostrils. It's time for the part of the ritual few modern sleep routines include, offering midnight snacks to yourself. And to your future corpse. Yes, truly. An attendant glides in carrying a polished tray of small delicacies. Figs, dates, honey cakes shaped like ankhs, a dab of goat cheese, and a palm-sized goblet of fermented barley drink. Not enough to fill you, just enough to sustain your car, your life force, while it wanders through dreams. But the real meal? It isn't for you. Not this version of you anyway. Along the far wall, a small table rests beside a perfectly carved wooden model of your tomb. It's a scale replica, complete with painted sarcophagus and tiny shabti figurines, posed like they're already late for afterlife chores. Upon this table, your priest lays another tray of food, identical to yours. It's symbolic. Offering nourishment now ensures your spirit doesn't go hungry later. The logic is both comforting and mildly morbid. You reach for a date, its skin glossy, its sweetness nearly candied by the desert air. It sticks to your fingers as you bite, the sugar melting on your tongue. For a moment, you're not a living god reclining in moonlight, you're just someone savouring dessert at midnight, which frankly, makes you feel more divine than anything else. There's a tiny carved baboon on the edge of your tray. His face is smug. You name him Nibble. He's your snack guardian now. Historians still argue whether these dual meals were consumed every night or prepared only during ceremonial evenings. Some evidence suggests daily practice in royal households, others argue it was a festival-only indulgence. Either way, there's something reassuring about knowing your future mummy self is getting a slice of honey bread alongside your current incarnation. As you chew slowly, your priest begins the invocation of nourishment. It's less dramatic than it sounds, mostly a calm listing of ingredients offered to various gods, followed by a wish that you be granted dreams unmarred by hunger or longing. Practical, poetic, and also a little bit like ancient DoorDash. Next to the tray lies a small bowl of natron salt, Egypt's all-purpose wonder powder. It absorbs moisture, preserves things, and apparently works great for indigestion. The priest pinches a grain between his fingers and flicks it toward your sleeping mat, a nod to preservation, or maybe a preventative sprinkle. You're not sure. Nearby, a cat watches from the shadows. Not metaphorically, a real palace cat, lean, elegant, possibly divine, slips silently onto the tiles. She eyes your honey cake with casual arrogance before curling beneath your bed. Her name, you've decided, is Mehet. She'll appear again in your dreams, probably arguing with a hippo. And now, with your stomach warmed and your car satisfied, the final act of this edible ritual begins. You dip your fingers into a bowl of lotus water and trace a symbol on your chest, an ankh, looping across your skin with damp coolness. This is less for show and more for guidance. It's a symbolic compass, directing your essence through the night's journey. You lean back, your fingers still taste faintly of date syrup. The room is quieter now, as if the walls themselves have digested your offering. Somewhere outside, a lion growls, a long, low sound carried on the desert wind. But inside, everything is calm, sweet, stilled. Your eyes half close. In the flickering torchlight, the painted ceiling stars seem to swirl just slightly. Or maybe it's the barley drink. You're not sure. You remember something now. An old saying, murmured by a grandmother long past. A pharaoh never dreams alone. And maybe, just maybe, that's true. Because behind you, your second tray still sits untouched. A feast for the soul you'll one day become. You try to sleep. Truly, you do. But something's off. The bed hasn't changed. It's still as rigid as a royal proclamation. The headrest, as always, cradles your skull with the tenderness of a stone melon holder. The ceiling stars haven't wandered. The incense still curls like lazy snakes. And yet, your eyelids twitch, your jaw clenches. You hear the faintest sound that ruins everything, snoring. Not from you, of course. Pharaohs don't snore, officially. But from somewhere just beyond the curtain, an echoing, wet-throated sound. Like someone dragging a hippo through gravel. It's one of the guards. Or maybe the astronomer. Hard to say. But once you hear it, you can't unhear it. This is not a modern problem. Ancient Egyptians were obsessed with sleep disturbances. Entire spells were written for banishing the noise of the wheezy one. One even suggests clapping 3 times while invoking a moon god. You try this. It only startles Mehet, the cat, who hisses at your elbow and disappears into the shadows. Servants reappear quietly, as if summoned by the tension in your eyebrows. One brings out a small bowl, gold-rimmed, filled with what looks like beeswax. He rolls it into 2 neat little cones and gently offers them to you. Golden earplugs. You smile. Finally. They slide in snugly, muffling the outside world until the snoring becomes the mere hint of a distant cow trying to play a didgeridoo. You return to stillness. But now, something itches. Your calf twitches. A faint tickle behind the knee. You freeze. Is it your linen wrapping? A stray feather? Or, Ra forbid, a scorpion? You don't move. Just breathe. An attendant rushes over with a bronze lamp and carefully inspects the bedding. Nothing. But just in case, he sprinkles a powder mix of natron and ground rosemary along the edges of the mattress. a time-honored ritual for warding off nighttime biters. You'd ask if it works, but the alternative is not trying it. So, onward. As the quiet returns, your mind drifts to ancient texts, papyrus scrolls describing pharaohs who couldn't sleep for nights, their dreams blocked by curses, indigestion, or misplaced amulets. One tale describes a king haunted by the spirit of a servant he forgot to bury with enough bread. Another tells of a queen who heard whispers in her sleep, only to discover her bed frame had been made from wood stolen from a temple. Historians still argue whether these were cautionary tales or the earliest known "don't blame me, blame the bed" excuses. You shift, this time intentionally. The oil on your skin has absorbed enough to stop sticking to the linen. Your amulet chain rustles faintly. The blue lotus scent remains, just subtle now, like the memory of a dream you haven't had yet. A lullaby begins somewhere in the hallway. Not sung, hummed. A servant's voice, half melody, half breath, echoing through the palace corridors, like smoke through papyrus reeds. The tune is old. You don't recognize the words, but your bones feel like they do. You sigh, then chuckle, because someone, maybe even you, once commissioned a 300-person temple choir to perform sacred chants each sunrise, and yet tonight, what's helping you sleep is one bored servant humming to herself while cleaning a brazier. The snoring has stopped. Or you've stopped noticing it. Either way, it's progress. Your limbs settle again. No more itches, no more bites. You feel less like a ceremonial roast, and more like yourself again. Then comes a light tapping. Not a knock. Just a gentle, "Let me pass," from the breeze itself, pushing through the ceiling vent. You feel it drift across your chest. It's not cold, just moving. And in that moment, all your rituals, ointments, invocations, and golden earplugs seem to swirl together into something soft, something human. Sleep, it turns out, can't always be forced. Sometimes it arrives not with sacred chants or crocodile oils, but with silence earned, rituals done, and a breeze carrying forgotten songs through stone halls. You close your eyes. You don't need dreams yet. Just this stillness. Just this breath. Just this perfect pause. You're not asleep yet, but you're definitely drifting. Your body feels lighter now, as if the air has thickened just enough to cradle your limbs in invisible linen. You're on the edge of something. Maybe a dream, maybe the duat itself. And just when your consciousness begins to melt like beeswax under the torch, a sound nudges you back. Music. Not the hum from before. This is structured, deliberate. Plucked strings, the low, watery trill of a wooden flute, a slow rhythm like a heartbeat played on stretched skin. Possibly a drum, possibly someone tapping a bowl of lentils in time. Lullabies in ancient Egypt weren't just for children. Royal adults had them too, composed to guide the soul gently from wakefulness into the divine realm of sleep. It's said that musicians were chosen not for talent, but for how dreamlike their playing made the listeners feel. You can see why. The sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, like the Nile itself, whispering in a forgotten language. You recognize the melody. It's one of your favorites. It's called the Breath of Ma'at, a tune believed to balance the heart and dispel dreams of chaos. According to one scroll, hearing it before sleep ensured your soul wouldn't wander into any unpleasant metaphysical neighborhoods. You believe it. You always sleep better with it playing. And you're not alone. A soft flutter from the other side of the room signals the arrival of your night animals. No, not real animals. These are ritual creatures, trained or symbolic companions, chosen to embody qualities you wish to carry into the next day. Tonight there's a goose named Hetep, calm and unusually well-behaved, fluffed into a loaf beside your bed. A monkey sits in a high alcove, tail curled around a torch stand, eyes half-lidded in drowsy approval. And a tiny dog, more fluff than bark, circles twice on a silk rug, then drops into a sigh loud enough to ruffle your foot blanket. They are not pets, not exactly. They're part lullaby, part guard, and yes, their placement is intentional. The goose represents watchfulness, the monkey, cleverness, the dog, loyalty, and all three apparently help absorb nightmares. You're not entirely convinced of the science, but it's tradition. Plus, they're soft, and Hetep's feathered breathing rhythm is oddly contagious. The lullaby continues. Now a new layer, voices. Not words, just vowel sounds. Smooth and round, blending with the instruments. 3 female voices, priestesses of Hathor, goddess of love, music and sleep. They sit cross-legged behind a screen, mostly hidden, their hands moving like wind through papyrus. Their singing rises and falls, never pushing, always circling back to that same haunting cadence. You feel your pulse slowing to match it. Historians still argue whether royal lullabies were improvised nightly or drawn from a set cycle of sacred verses. Some temples kept papyrus archives of dream hymns, catalogued by tone and intention. For peace, for fertility, for protection from giant snakes. Tonight's feels like one written for quiet joy, or maybe just for relief. Even pharaohs have long days, and sometimes, like tonight, you just want to feel like someone's rocking the universe until it nods off. One of the priestesses strikes a chord that vibrates through your ribs. Your breath catches. The sound resonates like something remembered from before you were born. Even the painted baboons on the wall look like they're swaying a little. The air, thick with blue lotus, now carries a new note, milk and cardamom, faint and warm. A final offering burns on a tiny clay dish near your bed, smoke spiraling into an almost perfect coil. Everything aligns. The music, the scent, the rhythm of your heart, the animals at rest. You could sleep now. Maybe you already have. Or maybe this perfect stillness, this celestial hum is the dream. And if it is, you don't want to wake up just yet. Your body is still. Your thoughts drift like boats without oars. And just as you're slipping deeper into the folds of night, someone quietly slides something under your mattress. Don't worry, it's intentional. Ancient Egyptians believed that what you slept on mattered just as much as what you slept in. And beneath that elegant cedarwood bed frame lies a carefully arranged lineup of amulets. You may not feel them, but they're there, humming in their own invisible language. Tonight's lineup includes the usual suspects: a frog-shaped amulet for fertility and safe transformation, a miniature blade-shaped charm to sever evil influences, a protective eye of Horus carved into lapis lazuli, and a tiny figure of Taweret, the hippo goddess of childbirth and sleep. Taweret is especially important. She's got a big belly, lion's paws, and the general demeanour of someone who would slap a demon with a sandal if it tried to sneak under your bed. There's even a belief that placing her amulet near your feet stops nightmares from climbing upward. You find this strangely comforting. The amulets are placed with careful orientation, north, south, east and west, each aligned with cardinal directions and the sacred flow of the Nile. According to temple scrolls, this layout forms a protective net of Ma'at, ensuring order triumphs over chaos as you sleep. Historians still argue whether this net was spiritual geometry or just ancient feng shui. Either way, the symmetry is soothing. A servant whispers a brief chant while arranging them. You hear fragments: breath to the lungs, coolness to the heart, sight to the dreaming eye. It's not loud enough to follow, but the cadence presses gently on your mind, like a hand on a shoulder saying, "Rest now." And then, the final step, the placement of the dream seal. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. A single glyph, drawn in ochre ink on a sliver of linen, is tucked beneath your pillow, or more accurately, under your stone headrest. The symbol varies each night. Tonight's is the hieroglyph for shed, meaning to rescue or to deliver. A good choice if your dreams take you through the choppier parts of the underworld. You're now officially amulet-armoured, spiritually GPS tagged, and cleared for astral departure. You close your eyes, then open them again, just briefly. A flicker catches your attention. The gentle glow of a polished stone set in the nearby wall. It's not a torch. It's faience, a glazed ceramic tile designed to shimmer in moonlight. The tile shows a lotus flower opening with the dawn. It's been embedded near your sleeping space since your first coronation night. Your gaze softens. You remember that night, the mix of fear and power, the priest's trembling hands as he placed the first amulet under your bed, the heavy scent of cedar, the 1,000 whispered blessings, and you remember thinking, will I ever truly sleep again? Tonight, it seems, maybe you will. You shift slightly. The amulet chain around your chest makes the faintest metallic sound. Nothing breaks, nothing aches. Even Mahet, your nocturnal feline companion, seems satisfied. She's returned to the foot of your bed, curled into a perfect spiral, paws tucked under her chin like a sleeping deity. You wonder if the amulets guard her too, or if maybe she's guarding you. The torches dim now, one by one. Not extinguished, just lowered, allowed to flicker at their lowest flame, casting long, sleepy shadows over the muralled walls. Above you, Nut stretches on, her star-painted belly unchanged. The baboons on the wall still raise their hands to the invisible sun, and beneath you, a collection of charms hums a silent chorus into the folds of linen and time. Sleep is near now, and this time, you think it will stay. You feel the hush shift again, subtly, like the palace walls themselves, just exhaled. And with that breath comes the final, most delicate stage of your nocturnal rite, dream control. In one corner, a low table has been arranged with remarkable precision. A strip of fine linen, 2 obsidian bowls, a short reed pen, and a wafer-thin clay tablet no bigger than your palm. Tonight, these humble objects form the cockpit of your subconscious voyage. A dream scribe steps forward. She is neither priest nor servant, but something in between. A specialist in sleep, the way a navigator is a specialist in stars. Her shaven head gleams in lamplight, a faint smear of indigo lines her eyelids in the shape of protective falcon wings. Without a word, she moistens the reed pen in one bowl, a mixture of crushed blue lotus petals and water, and writes a single hieroglyph in deep azure ink on the linen strip. Nefer, good. The Egyptians believed a written word could radiate intent. Tonight, that single sign will serve as an anchor, steering your dreams toward calm currents. She wraps the strip loosely around your right wrist. The scent of lotus is gentle, narcotic, and just a little sweet, enough to coax your mind into softness without tipping it into oblivion. A servant ties a matching strip around your left ankle, ensuring the pull of goodness runs the full length of your body like a low-voltage spiritual current. But intent must be stated aloud, so the scribe leans close and whispers a tiny litany against your ear, 3 lines, all beginning with May you. May you drift where the cool waters flow. May you see only that which brings joy. May you rise at dawn unburdened. The words slide into your skull and settle behind your eyes, warm and weightless. You feel your breathing slow, matching the hidden drumbeat of your heart. Next comes the obsidian bowl. The scribe dips her finger into a thick, pearly salve, then draws a simple door shape on your forehead, 2 vertical lines, 1 horizontal. This, she explains, in a voice barely louder than wind, is the gate of Saw, a symbolic threshold the Ka must cross to enter dream realms. Historians still argue whether such markings were literal portals or placebo for anxious rulers, but nobody disputes their longevity. Tablets from the Middle Kingdom describe identical door sigils right down to the dot at the lintel, a torch to light the passage. She steps aside. A priest of Thoth appears, carrying a tiny alabaster flask. Inside, powdered opium mixed with honey, Egypt's most serious sleep tonic. You do not drink it, you simply inhale its vapor as he fans the flask beneath your nose. Warmth flows out from the back of your skull, softening neck and shoulders until even the stone headrest feels like down. A third attendant lifts a miniature bronze mirror. Your reflection flickers in torchlight. Under the door sigil, your eyelids twitch. Your pupils impossibly seem to darken further, like wells filling with ink. The attendant tilts the mirror right, then left, murmuring a protective spell to seal wandering shadows. The mirror is believed to freeze any malicious spirit that tries to leap in via reflective surfaces. You choose to believe it works, better safe than spiritually hijacked. Finally, the dream scribe brings the clay tablet and presses its cool surface to your bare chest. It holds a fresh impression, the image of a sleeping jackal curled around a moon. When she removes it, the clay retains the warmth of your heartbeat. She will place it near the foot of your bed. By morning, priests will study any cracks that form overnight, divining whether omens visited you. Think of it as the world's earliest sleep tracker, no Bluetooth required. Everything is ready. Wristband, ankle band, door sigil, protective mirror, opium honey breeze. The scribe retreats, her sandaled feet whispering against polished stone. A torch is snuffed, then another, until only one remains at the far side of the chamber. Its flame the size of a cupped flame in a windless desert. Silence lengthens in satisfying increments. Breath by breath, you cross the invisible line between wakefulness and dream. You feel as if you are standing on the prow of Ra's night boat, the river of stars yawning out before you. You taste lotus and honey on the back of your tongue, and somewhere, everywhere, a single word pulses like a heartbeat inside your skull. Nefer, Nefer, Nefer. The door painted on your forehead warms. It opens. You drift, not with a jolt, not with a sigh, but with the subtle feeling of stepping sideways into another room, one made of water, clouds, and old memories you didn't know you had. This is the dream space, or at least, this is what the ancient Egyptians believed it looked like. It starts in a boat, naturally. A long reed bark, lacquered in white resin and trimmed in gold. It floats, not on the Nile, but on a river made of stars. Above you, constellations shimmer and ripple like fish beneath glass. This isn't imagination, this is what you were trained for. Dreaming was a skill, a ritual, and for someone like you, a pharaoh, it was a form of navigation. Priests had manuals for this, which symbols to look for, which creatures to avoid, which god forms meant you were doing it right. Dreaming was like chess, with cobras. You glance down. You're wearing a loose linen tunic, different from the ornate bedclothes you drifted off in. On your chest is the faint outline of the Ankh symbol, traced in ink back in the waking world, still glowing here like a tiny sun. It keeps you anchored, supposedly. Around you, the dream sways. One moment, you're floating past giant papyrus stalks that hum with music. The next, you're standing atop a pyramid, watching the night fold inward like the petals of a closing lotus. It all feels real, but not quite touchable. You step forward. The floor beneath you, whatever it is, shifts, but doesn't give. A voice calls out, not from the side or behind, but from within. It's familiar, like your own voice after it's travelled through stone halls. It says, "Come to the Garden of Reeds." Ah, the dream's main event. The Garden of Reeds, or Sekhet Aru, was the ancient Egyptian version of paradise. Lush, eternal fields, glistening rivers, barley taller than you. All souls of the worthy ended up here. Which means your subconscious has decided to do a test run. Always good to know the neighbourhood early. You walk. Your sandals leave no print. Ahead, the grass glows green-blue, luminous from within. A golden ibis nods as you pass. A jackal offers a single blink. Then the sound begins, soft, pulsing, like the heartbeats of every ancestor who ever lived. Each beat presses lightly on your chest, not heavy, not loud, just present. Dream control wasn't just about scenery. It was about insight. Ancient dream interpreters believed dreams carried direct messages from the gods, veiled in metaphor. A falcon? Good fortune. A crumbling statue? Trouble ahead. A runaway hippo? Possibly indigestion. Possibly a warning about your brother's political ambitions. Historians still debate whether these dreams were seen as divine truth or elaborate reflections of one's waking guilt and glory. The Egyptians didn't separate sleep and spirituality the way modern people do. They stacked meaning into every whisper and shadow. In your dream, you pause beside a pool, a mirror-like surface. You see yourself, not as a pharaoh in full regalia, but simply as you, human, mortal, breathing. This reflection doesn't move on its own. It matches you exactly. It waits. You lower your head, place your fingers on the water. The ripples spread, and for a moment, everything blurs. Then you hear laughter. It's not yours. It's the sound of a child somewhere between now and long ago. You turn, and there, in the reeds, is a small figure with eyes like polished onyx and hands clutching a papyrus scroll. The child waves, says nothing. But you feel it. This is memory, not prophecy. a piece of you, forgotten, brought back for inspection. The scroll he holds? Blank, not yet written. You take a step forward. He smiles once, drops the scroll, and vanishes into mist. When you look down, the scroll is gone, but the word Nefer echoes again in your ears. You awaken slightly, not into the world, but into the sense that the dream is ending, time's ebbing. The symbolic boat is returning. A pale figure waits at the shore. Not a god, not a beast, just a woman with a lantern. She does not speak. She lifts the light. You nod. And just like that, the dream folds in on itself, like a perfectly made bed at the end of the night. You're not quite awake, but you're almost home. You return slowly. First comes sensation, the awareness of your own breath, the faint tug of linens over your chest, the still slick trace of blue lotus on your skin. Then sound. A bird calling from far beyond the walls. One long note. Then silence again. You haven't opened your eyes. Not yet. But you're here. Awake in the ancient way, before light and before thought, drifting just below the surface of morning. The air has changed. It's cooler now, laced with the earliest breath of dawn. Somewhere out in the palace courtyard, a flame is relit. A torch crackles. A footstep echoes. You can sense it, the world turning toward morning. But there's still one more ritual left. Final prayers. A temple boy enters quietly, carrying a shallow bowl of water infused with petals. He doesn't speak. No one does. You extend your right hand, and he pours the water gently across your palm. It's a small gesture, cleansing the sleep from your body, purifying your spirit before the return of Ra. The priests file in once more, fewer this time. No oils, no ointments, just voices. Low, even, rhythmic chanting. You recognize the words, even if you've never quite memorized them. A litany of rebirth, an offering to the sun god for another safe return. And, perhaps more humbling, a thank you for letting you wake up at all. Ancient Egyptians didn't assume they'd return from sleep. Night was not simply rest, it was death in miniature. Each rising of the sun, a resurrection, a second chance. One priest places a small reed scroll near your bed. Upon it, the dream scribe has transcribed fragments of your vision, symbols scrawled in the same blue ink she used to draw the door on your forehead. An ibis, a scroll, a moon, a child, and the word Nefer circled 3 times. You smile faintly. So, the dream mattered. The amulets under your bed are carefully retrieved, one by one, dusted and kissed, then returned to their cedar box. Even the clay tablet, the one that warmed on your chest, is checked for lines or fractures. None. A sign, perhaps, that you were untroubled. Your night animals are gone now. Hetep, the goose, no longer loafs by your side. The monkey, the dog, they've vanished like dream smoke. Only Mehet, your cat, remains, blinking at the brightening sky through slitted eyes. She yawns, turns, and disappears under a nearby bench, already done with the morning. The final torch is extinguished. The chamber is now lit only by the suggestion of sunrise. Through a carved opening in the east wall, you see the first pinkish glow touching the tip of a distant obelisk. The silhouette of Nut, painted across your ceiling, begins to fade as real stars retreat from view. You sit up. The linen sheet falls in a crumple around your waist. The headrest, hard and cold, is set aside with care. A servant brings your day robe, but you don't put it on just yet. Not until you whisper one last sentence to Thoth, the ibis-headed god whose statue still watches from the corner. Thank you, you murmur, for the journey. Because even if it was only a dream, it meant something. The gods haven't answered. They rarely do. But that doesn't matter. You are here. You are whole. You are awake. And as the temple bells begin their morning chime across the river, you rise from your bed of cedar, from your night of fragrant rituals and cosmic sailing, and you step barefoot onto the polished floor. You have slept like a god. Now, it's time to rule like one. Let your eyes remain closed now. You don't need to rise like a pharaoh, or wrap yourself in linens, or smell faintly of crocodile oil. All you need to do is rest. Imagine yourself still in that chamber, where the air is cool, and the ceiling still glows with painted stars, and the sky goddess Nut stretches overhead, a living lullaby draped across time. Breathe slowly, like the Nile on a still morning. You're lying on a gold-framed bed, but it feels like clouds now. The stone headrest? It's softened. Your limbs are warm, weightless, calm. Outside, the desert wind curls through palm fronds. A flute echoes, a bird calls, but inside, all is still. You've travelled far tonight, not in miles, but in memory, myth, and imagination. Through oils and stars, through dreams and gods, through laughter and lotus, and now, nothing is expected of you. No decisions, no marching, no thrones. Just this stillness, this space between sleep and waking. Let it hold you a little longer, and when you are ready, maybe not now, maybe later, let the morning find you slowly, because tonight you slept like a pharaoh, and tomorrow? Well, that can wait.